There's 10 NFL wide receivers with over 900 yards right now. But who will end up being number one? What is up, guys? Ativ here. And in this video, I will be talking about who my number one receiver is for the receiving yards leader at the end of the season. So, without further ado, let's hop right into it. Now, the first receiver I'm going to be talking about is Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, now this is his schedule right now, right? He has to play versus the Broncos, he has to play at the Dolphins, at the Saints, versus the Falcons, and versus the Chargers. Alright, so it's not a very hard schedule, don't get me wrong. But Tyreek Hill, he has to play with Travis Kelce, who, and by the way, here's the list for the top 10 receivers for the receiving yards right now. And he has to compete with Travis Kelce. And every receiver / tight end that you see in the thumbnail is who we're going to be talking about in this video. So that's 6 people. But Tyreek Hill, my only problem with him is he has to play along with Travis Kelce, and that just leaves 2 people, right? Like, look, Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, they could both honestly get 100 yards for the rest of the season per game, and I wouldn't be surprised because they have Mahomes at their QB, and they're not playing the hardest defenses in the league. I mean, they're playing the Broncos, that's a very tough defense. They're playing out the Dolphins, that's a decently tough defense, but they don't do very good against really good teams. They're playing the Saints, their defense have been very good off late. Then they're playing the Falcons and the Chargers, whose defense have been pretty choky. So, I think that Tyreek Hill, he has a lot of potential for around 1,500 yards, but I don't see any more than that. But I could see him getting around 1,700 yards. I just don't think it'll happen. As you saw in the list that I already showed, he is number 2 in receiving yards right now, only behind DK Metcalf, who is another person we'll be talking about. Tyreek Hill, he currently has 1,021. He loves doing flips, as you just saw there. And he was insane in their game versus the Buccaneers, right? 13 receptions for 269 yards, and he got 3 touchdowns, which were every single touchdown Patrick Mahomes threw. So I think that Tyreek Hill, he has a lot of potential to be number 1, but he's not my answer for number 1, alright? Because he has to go versus Travis Kelce. Now, the next one I'm going to be talking about is Terry McLaurin. And he, of course, is on the Washington football team, so here's their schedule. They have to play at the Steelers, very tough defense, at the 49ers, another very tough defense, versus the Seahawks, pretty easy defense, versus the Panthers, not the hardest defense ever, and then at the Eagles, which is a pretty tough defense. Now, Terry McLaurin, I actually like him a lot. I think that he's the most underrated NFL receiver right now. And it's mainly because he's on a bad team. That's what I always tell my friends, and that's what he always answers with, which makes sense quite a bit. But honestly, I think that Terry McLaurin has a very high chance to come out being number 1. He is really the only receiver on his team that's even competitive. And he's by far the most targeted, and he has the most receptions and the most yards. He's a great player all around, I think, and I believe that he had the 2nd most receiving yards of any receiver in his rookie season. For last season, he had 919. I'm pretty sure A.J. Brown was the only one who had more than him with 1,057, who he's having a great season as well, but he will not be talked about in this video. But anyways, Terry McLaurin, my only problem with him is, this is not his fault at all, but his QBs. I think that that's the only thing holding him back. If he had a better QB, then, don't get me wrong, I love Alex Smith. He was on the Niners for a very long time, but I just don't think that Alex Smith is that good. While I do think that the Washington football team has a very high chance to be number 1 in their division, it's the NFC least. I mean, how much is that really saying? And I could see Terry McLaurin being number 1, and I really want him to be number 1 out of the 6 players I'm going to talk about. I just don't see him being number 1. But it's mainly because of his QBs holding him back, and because of Antonio Gibson and how much he's getting the ball now, that people are realizing how good he is, So, I don't think that Terry McLaurin is going to end up being number 1 either. Now, our next receiver we're going to talk about is DK Metcalf. And DK Metcalf, of course, he's having an insane season. He just had 177 yards versus the Eagles. But I don't see him being number one either. But first of all, let's read the schedule. Versus the Giants, easy defense. Versus the Jets, very easy defense. At the Washington football team, number one pass defense, so that's a very tough defense. Versus the Rams, in my eyes, they're the number one, but statistically, they're the number two pass defense, another very tough defense. And at the Niners, a very tough defense as well. So DK Metcalf has to play quite a few tough defenses. And he has Russell Wilson, who's probably a top 3 quarterback in the NFL right now. But my problem with DK Metcalf is Tyler Lockett. It's either you're going to guard DK Metcalf or you're going to guard Tyler Lockett. So one of them is always going to have an insane game. And I think that now that DK Metcalf just had that 177-yard game versus the Eagles, people are really going to put their main secondary focus on DK Metcalf, which I think might be holding him back from becoming that number one spot, because then, of course, Tyler Lockett's going to get the ball. But I don't think that Tyler Lockett's going to end up being number one. Like, he doesn't even have 900 yards. I'm not sure if he has 800 yards either right now. But I can't see DK Metcalf being number one when he has to play with Tyler Lockett. He probably loves playing with Tyler Lockett. He even called Tyler Lockett the most underrated player in the NFL. But Russell Wilson likes DK Metcalf a lot. They've been practicing a bunch over the off-season. And I think that DK Metcalf, as long as Tyler Lockett's next to him, he won't have a chance at being number one. He might have a chance, like he's the number one receiving yards leader right now. But, people are guarding Tyler Lockett closely, or Russell Wilson's just not paying attention to Tyler Lockett. It's one of the two. I think it might be the second one. It might be the first one. I'm not sure. I can't see DK Metcalf ending up number one. Now our next receiver is none other than DeAndre Hopkins. This is the second to last receiver that I'll be talking. Second to last player I'll be talking about. Or third to last, sorry. There's still going to be 2 more after him. But DeAndre Hopkins, boy oh boy, his schedule is somewhat tough. He has to play versus the Rams, in my opinion, the number one pass defense. Then at the Giants, pretty easy. Versus the Eagles, who they're going to force a lot of pressure on Kyler Murray, but I don't think it'll affect DeAndre Hopkins too much. Then they have to play versus the Niners, tough defense. And then they have to play versus the Rams again, which in my opinion is the best pass defense. So for DeAndre Hopkins, I think that honestly, it's going to be between him and the next player we're going to talk about to be the number one receiving yards leader. DeAndre Hopkins, he's really playing, he doesn't really have any competition in terms of who's going to be number one in terms of yards. Like, sure, Christian Kirk's there, but it's not like Christian Kirk's getting that many yards anyways. DeAndre Hopkins, I'm pretty sure he already has 967 yards. And I could see him getting 100 yards for every single one of the games remaining. Like, the Cardinals are playing some lockdown defenses, and DeAndre Hopkins, he can catch anything, basically. He probably has the best hands in the NFL right now. And I think that he's really going to put that on display for these last games. He really wants his team to get into the playoffs, obviously, because it's his team. And, that's his mentality. He's a very competitive player. He wants to do as good as possible. And he's going to go out there and try to do everything he can possibly. Because the Cardinals, no one knows whether they're going to make the playoffs or not. Like, basically, every other team, and maybe Terry McLaurin, the football team as well, they're going to have, Terry McLaurin might play really tough as well for these last couple of games, try to make it into the playoffs, but I see that DeAndre Hopkins and the next player we will be talking about right now, Stefon Diggs. I see DeAndre Hopkins and Stefon Diggs being the top 2 receiving yards leaders. Stefon Diggs, he has to play at the Niners, tough defense. Versus the Steelers, a very tough defense. At the Broncos, tough defense. At the Patriots, not too tough of a defense. And versus the Dolphins, kind of unsure about their defense. So he has to actually play quite a few tough defenses, but Josh Allen, he's going to rely on Stefon Diggs very heavily for these last couple of games. And Devin Singletary and Zach Moss and Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs. That's the Bills' offense right there. It's a great offense as well. And then John Brown sometimes when he's healthy, but he hasn't done too much this season. So Stefon Diggs, he was actually number 1 in terms of receiving yards for a very long time. Then he just had a really bad game last week. I mean, Josh Allen only threw for 157 yards anyway. So, like, Stefon Diggs sometimes even gets 157 yards in the whole game, which is very impressive. So, shout out to Stefon Diggs. I could see him and DeAndre Hopkins, though, being the number 1 receiver. And Stefon Diggs, he doesn't have much competition. He has a very tough stretch of games remaining. And I mean, Josh Allen's just going to rely on Stefon Diggs heavily for being a great receiver. And I could see that boosting Stefon Diggs' yards big time, which, I mean, it'll just lead him to be the number 1 yards leader, you know? So for me, it's between him and DeAndre Hopkins. But our last player is none other than Travis Kelce. I've already showed you the Chiefs' schedule. They have to play, or talked about it, I should say. They have to play versus the Broncos, at the Dolphins, at the Saints, versus the Falcons, and versus the Chargers. So they have half of the defenses they have to play are somewhat pretty tough, and then the other half, not the toughest. But I think that Travis Kelce, at one point, I told my friend this actually, that I thought that Travis Kelce was going to be the yards leader, but this was just like 2 days ago when he had 978. I did not actually think that DK Metcalf was going to go out and get 177. And I never really thought about how Tyreek Hill was going to affect Travis Kelce's yards either. But Travis Kelce, I made a video on this. I think that he will be the number 1 yards leader for tight ends of all time, but I don't think he will be for wide receivers this season. And I just think that Stefon Diggs and DeAndre Hopkins have a higher chance because they don't have to play versus anyone, you know? But my answer to the title is DeAndre Hopkins. I could definitely see Stefon Diggs being number 1 as well. But anyways, that will do it for this video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. And make sure to leave a comment below about who you think will be the number 1 yards leader. But anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.